Hello and a warm welcome to this special program coming to you on the World Mental Health Day. It's an occasion where mental health professionals across the world spread awareness about mental health, mental illness. They also advocate against the stigmas, taboos and myths related to mental illness. In fact, many countries observe the Mental Health Awareness Week, where they put the spotlight on mental illness and also study the impact on the lives of the people. Remember, according to the recent survey done in India, about 150 million Indians suffer from some kind of mental illness and need long-term and short-term intervention measures. So on this occasion, we'll try and see how grave the situation in India is. And to discuss all this, we have a few brightest minds associated with us. Is Dr. Nimesh Desai, Director of the Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences, an authoritarian voice on the subject. Next to him is Madhu Juneja. She is a volunteer as well as a counsellor and associated with Sanjeevani. Next to her is Gaurav Bansal, a lawyer as well as an activist. Next to him is Nina Claire. She is the editorial lead of Well-Being, associated also with Business World. And next to her is TK Rajalakshmi, Deputy Senior Editor, Frontline. I welcome all the guests on the show on this special occasion of the World Mental Health Day. And to start the panel discussion with you, Dr. Desai, that for many people who are watching this program, can you encapsulate in a few words what comprises mental illness? And if you talk about mental health, what is it exactly in today's situation?
Some decades ago across the world and till now, unfortunately, in parts of India, mental illness only meant what was called lunacy or madness. In science and in correct executive and judicial policy, that has changed, that has enlarged to include what used to be referred to as madness or lunacy to be seen as major mental illnesses or severe mental disorders or psychosis. And then there is this large group of mental health problems that's seen as common mental disorders or neurosis that will include depression, anxiety, phobia. And then there's a whole lot of range of other problems, from alcohol and drug abuse to emotional adjustment disorders to personality issues. And so mental illnesses or mental disorders today will include a large range of problems. To give it one perspective, the figure that you cited from the National Mental Health Survey gives you what's called a population estimate, a number of people who require help. The other simpler way of looking at it for some people might be what percentage of people suffer with diagnosable and treatable mental disorders. And that in India is largely agreed based on that survey and other studies to be about 10%. And so 1 in 10 persons at any point of time will have a diagnosable disorder that can benefit from treatment.
So when you talk about this 10% population, so how does a layman view the scenario? Is it grave, or how is the situation in India?
What was called psychosis and is now called severe mental disorders will include conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, paranoid or delusional disorders, where the person loses the insight that he or she has an illness. And so he doesn't really recognize the need, the others around him or her might recognize the need. That's about 1 to 2% in the population. The common mental disorders, depression, anxiety, phobia, obsession, these are about 6 to 8% in our country, much larger in the other cultures and countries, because this is culture dependent. The severe mental disorders are largely genetic, and so they remain similar across the globe, 1 to 2%. The common mental disorders will be about 5 to 6% or 7% in our country. That together will form the 10%.
You made a mention of the fact that the reason is quite to do related with culture aspect as well. And as the society evolves, a lot of things change. For example, maybe addiction to mobile phones, addiction to things like Netflix. I was just reading an article where there's a small boy who's been admitted in NIMHANS due to an addiction of Netflix. Now, and when people do not talk about the mental illness, they do not want to say that they are suffering from some kind of mental illness, how do you make people talk? Because you are dealing with families, you're dealing with people on one-on-one basis. How do you think that this issue really, you can make people talk on this?
I think first of all, it's important to recognize that it is a major issue today, because there's been a lot of denial on mental illness, even families. I mean, I work very closely with families of mentally ill, and even for a family member to come up and say that my ward, my son, my daughter or somebody in the family is suffering from a mental illness, it's hardly there. But you know, we've been organizing campaigns, we've been working at the community level, and today what we worked on a campaign called Chuppi Todo, which means, you know, break the silence.
Okay.
You're not alone, we are all together in this. So the whole idea is that together we can sort it out. But you know, it's again going back to the families. For a family member to come and ask for help, especially, you know, we have parents who are aged, who are 75 plus, 80 plus. So for them, they may be the only caregivers to somebody who is suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar. So even to come out and say we need help is a big thing, and it is happening today. It's not that it's a closed door issue.
Right.
People are coming out, but again, how do we deal with them? Where do we take them? What happens after us? So a major question is, as long as we are there, you know, things are fine, but after us, what happens?
But when you say that people are living in a denial mode when it comes to mental illness and they don't take it seriously as compared to other health
Illnesses,
disorders,
yes,
that
yes.
is also there. Gaurav, you obviously you're a lawyer, you would see things from a legislative perspective, but you are an activist as well. What are the challenges you really see when it comes you know, to tackling mental illness from the point of view of the society, from the point of view of families who are afflicted with the illness?
See, as in our country, as per our constitution, the parliament has to make the law, the government, the executive has to implement the same, and the court is here to interpret the law. But right now what we are facing is, the moment parliament make a law, the government is failing in implementing the same. And this is the reason that most of the acts like the Mental Health Care Act, 2017, and as well as the Right of Person with Disability Act also, they are not getting implemented because of lack of administrative will as well as the political will.
Okay.
And because of this,
And this is, you're saying, across the states?
across the states, in pan India, this is happening, and that is why the people are just knocking the door of Supreme Court, different high courts, as well as the session court, etc. And they are saying, please, these are our right, so please direct them to provide us, direct them to do their fundamental duties and to provide us the fundamental rights.
Right.
In one of the cases which we are fighting, there is the report of a committee. Committee says that there are around 12,000 to 15,000 persons who are fit for discharge, but because of the social stigma, they are just living in the mental health institution or the mental health hospital, and they are living since there is a lady who is since 1980s. She is living in a mental hospital
Right.
since 1980. So just this is the plight.
And she cannot go back to her home. In fact,
No one is going to accept. This is the
Right.
whole problem is.
Right.
So that is why the Supreme Court directed all the states
Right.
to have a halfway home concept.
yeah, we'll come on to we'll come back to the concept of this halfway home you're talking about. Let me get in Nina on this. Gaurav just spoke about the stigmas and the taboos with which, you know, the mental illness is attached, and he was giving an example of a lady who has not gone back to her home since 1980s, and people are not ready to accept. How do you really overcome these taboos and myths when you know that people are living in a denial mode? How do you really come out of those taboos?
I think it's a long-term plan that one has to approach this with, because I think education, and education, that's the only way that you can change mindsets of people. And one thing I very strongly feel about the way that we should be looking at the education system, although I'm not a specialist in any way, but I feel that working in this area, I've realized that there's a huge need for the curriculum to change.
Okay.
So while the happiness curriculum has been launched, I don't know how it's taken off, whether we have enough teachers. Secondly, I feel a need, like I was talking to Dr. Desai earlier, that humane education, kindness, compassion, as flighty and airy-fairy as it may seem, not only does it have to be a part of the curriculum at the school level, even at the corporate level, we have to sensitize HR
Absolutely.
and senior management about the fact that, you know what, just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not a disease, because people feel it. You can see a broken arm, you can see an X-ray, you can see a CAT scan, but you can't see the anxiety and stress or depression, or at a graver level, bipolar or schizophrenia or herpetophobia, you can't see it.
Right.
So I think education and sensitization is the most important thing.
So
we
Right. When you talk about kindness, compassion, and a humane approach, Rajalakshmi, media is the biggest vehicle for spreading awareness, and especially when people are living in a denial mode. Media plays a significant role in spreading awareness and how to, have a humane approach, how to tackle the issues on the ground. Is media really sensitive about tackling issues related to mental health?
Just about mental health. I think we find that in fact I think by and large the media has sort of generally abdicated its let's say its social responsibility and social role in social transformation, because I think the media in fact did have a role and continues to have a role in social change and in social transformation, but this gradual abdication is happening. Now it's because of various factors. One, of course, one can say it's also because of the commercialization of the media, where all such topics which do not sort of in fact bring you sort of let's say profits.
Because when it comes to mental illness, I've seen editors saying mental illness zyada bikta nahi hai. That's what
exactly. So it doesn't sell. So what sells is what comes, most of the time. So you have mental illness, women's issues, children's issues. These do not sell actually, unless they have a certain voyeuristic element, in them. So if there is if there is, let us say, like a mental health home, it has a major disaster, or you find mental patients perhaps chained and etc. and sort of subject to brutal treatment, that would perhaps occupy far more attention. And that too for a short span, rather than talking about let's say investment in health, for instance, because I feel, of course, I've had the benefit of listening to everybody, and I feel that that it is not just the let's say the sole responsibility of a family, etc. For instance, I think disease, the burden of disease has to be shared by society, because ultimately we are talking about a healthy society in the long run, and that has to be borne by society. And yes, and when I say society, I mean also the people who are in charge of running society, for instance the government. So I think elected governments have a role, have a far, I think, larger role in sort of taking on themselves the onus of care of these people who are, because if you put it all on the family, there are families who can afford, and if a majority of families who can't afford.
I think
stigma
everything
becomes
boils
an
down.
excuse.
Absolutely, everything boils down to the way you perceive the mentally ill patients, and what is the kind of perception you have about the mentally ill patients. Madhu, I'll come to you on this. That certain words which are normally have been used, for all these years, like retard, crazy, pagal hai. These are the kind of words which normally have been used when it comes to the mentally ill patients. Have the things changed, or the society still uses those words despite a legislative framework which says that no, you've got to be sensitive, media should not be writing like that? Is this change perceived?
See, change has happened, but the word that I come across is normal and abnormal.
Okay.
Very often when I'm communicating with mentally ill in a daycare center, so they say कि हम तो normal नहीं हैं. So then we have to tell them that everybody's parameters are different. So the boundary line between being abnormal and normal is very thin. But yes, you're right. I don't think it's changed much. But awareness is coming in, and last year WHO, in its theme, had made something called a psychological first aid.
Okay.
Which meant that to train the basic individual, to train the layman on how to be able to pick up, I'm not saying identify very severe mental illnesses, but to be able to pick up maybe basic anxiety, maybe avsad, as we call depression in Hindi, or stress. And the other thing they wanted was that the primary health centers, because in the rural areas, if we look at the different stakeholders who would be responsible for identifying mental health, I think the bulk of the population back home in the rural areas, they all reach out to the primary health center.
Right.
So they wanted that at least the treating physician there should be conversant in what we call psychosocial education.
Okay.
Which means a very basic identification of issues like, again, anxiety, depression, and to be handled it also to involve the family,
Right.
to have a routine. To
Well, I'll come to Dr. Desai
Yeah.
on this. When it comes to the family education, now there are many families, in fact, there are many examples where people are living with mental illness, but they do not know whether their child or the family member suffers from some kind of mental illness. And for all these viewers who are going to watch the program and who are watching this program, how would you really tell them that these are the first signs of mental illness, and look, this is the time where you need to visit a mental health professional or a doctor?
Significant change in one's behavior or lifestyle persisting over a few weeks,
Okay.
perceived by the person and or as seen by the people around. That's the broadest definition that be useful. What we will need to do, as all our colleagues have said, is to overcome the hesitation, the stigma, and step out. Step up and say, I need help. What you're mentioning and what everybody is saying is actually crucial. Very good data to show that there is about 80% treatment gap. And so those 10 out of 100 who are diagnosable persons with mental illness that I mentioned earlier, only 2 people reach any mental health service. 8 out of 10 people do not reach any mental health service. But the fact of the matter also is that the entire issue is essentially, as some of my colleagues said, society driven. If the social attitudes are ambivalent or in denial, all of us together, the government, the legal agencies, the media, the activists and the professionals, of course, will have to break that myth. We'll have to take that as a frontline main agenda. Is that happening? I think it's happening. Okay. I must also here differ with my friend Gaurav Bansal a bit. Like everything else, in India, it's not really so uniform to make a sweeping statement. There are states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Gujarat, Delhi, to at least name a few, which are doing very differently as compared to the others. There are pockets of abysmal neglect, and that's where the differential emphasis needs to be. What's also important to realize is that, like as Rav Lakshmi said, one can't possibly put the entire thing on families. There will have to be, like all disabilities and serious ailments, where families have limitations of looking after the person, the state will have to step in. Okay. And the newer legal frameworks are doing that. Okay. I am with Gaurav Bansal in as much as that uniform, consistent application of these newer laws, the Mental Health Care Act 2017 and the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, is not happening. To repeat, uniform, consistent implementation across this large country of ours. But there are pockets where very good work is happening that needs to be upscaled. The issue we'll have to realize is that unless the society changes its ambivalence and denial, the other agencies will keep trying and yet not succeed too well.
Right.
Sure.
I just take a cue from what you said that unless a society breaks away from its ambivalence, so let's use this program in discussing the major myths which are really associated with a mental illness. And Madhu, I'll start with you. Why don't you just inform the audience that, look, this is A, B, C, these are the myths, and this is what you need to do. So let's start one by one discussing this and tell the audience that, look, this is what you need to come out of. So can you just start with myth A, maybe?
Yeah. So myth A is coming back to this element of normalcy. Who is normal and who's not normal?
Okay.
You know, when you work with them closely, what you see is that they also differ in their parameters, like all of us. I mean, all of us, sometimes we take a leap, some of us take baby steps. So they are as okay as anybody else. They just need a sense of direction, and I think the basic thing they need is positive self-regard, dignity and respect.
Okay.
Once you give that, not compassion.
But how does that happen? Because you can't keep popping pills for every ill.
I think just somebody who's sensitive, who is empathetic, and you know, it's amazing. There's a myth. I mean, I personally feel that they don't feel, but I think they are the most sensitive, the most caring of all individuals.
So maybe what you're hinting at is that more of listening, more of talking, more of dialogue and exchange
And communication.
and communication. Okay, so let's go on to myth B, maybe Gaurav.
Myth B is that if sometimes the relative or the family feel, or the person in itself feel that if he will say, if he will admit in the society that I am the person who is a who has a problem or is mentally ill, so the society will neglect the same, and the society will say, okay, you are now out of the society, and this is the person who is, they will tell their children not to talk this person. So these are a kind of myth.
Okay, Nina, what according to you is that one big myth which you would like to inform the audience and just to ask them to come out of it?
Okay, my Masi is going to kill me, but I'm
Okay.
going to say it all the same. So on my way here, I messaged her, Masi, I'm so excited, I'm going on Rajya Sabha TV, and I was anxious and I wasn't sure if I wanted to come on. And she sent me a lovely message from her side saying that, Beta, don't ever use the crutch of anxiety, because you can always overcome it and not use it as an excuse for things in the future. So sometimes people, I would say not sometimes, very often, people think that you have some control over what you feel.
Okay.
So when you have anxiety, or you have depression, or you have stress, or you have schizophrenia, or is a grave mental illness, you don't have any control over it. While anxiety might be a smaller variant of or a different kind of neurosis when it comes to mental health, it's at the, I think, the closer end of this end of the spectrum versus, you know, the graver illnesses. You don't have control over it. So I think that's a huge myth, that you have some control over what you're feeling. I think the control factor comes in when you start preempting it, and that's what I advise to people, that preempt it. Get into meditation, exercise, practice mindfulness, and that's what I've invited into my life, and it's working wonders.
Okay.
And facing whatever is coming head on.
Okay, but Rajlakshmi, when it comes to media sensitizing the people and asking them to talk about their mental illness, how many of us do that? Because as Nina just said, that, you know, if somebody is suffering from anxiety, maybe I'll very easily say that, you know, I'm going through some very anxious moments right now, I'm under stress. But would you say that, you know, are you suffering from schizophrenia, or you are going through some kind of a serious mental disorder? Because the moment you start talking like that, people will say, "Ye to pagal hai." So
let
again,
us-
that element of seclusion comes in.
Yeah. In fact, I think we should face one fact which is not a myth, that we are a hugely, in fact, insensitive society. As a society, we are hugely insensitive. You know, I think irrespective of what people might say about our ancient past and glory and all that, but we are at a societal level, and also at an individual level, we are hugely insensitive. Our ability to listen to others is not just there. We in fact are very quick, to stereotype. We are very quick, to label. We are very quick to put people in silos immediately. So either it's part of our baggage, part of our socialization, or our own conscious desire not to change.
You made a very significant point that, you know, the moment people start talking about a particular mental illness, Dr. Desai, I think that person will be labeled, or he'll be judged according to a particular stereotype. So when patients come to you, how do you really convince them that you don't worry about, you know, being stereotyped, you don't worry about being bracketed under a category? How do you really convince the patients? Because people here come to you with a lot of hope.
They do, and as I think Madhu said, the crucial part in concept and by now in law is to regard every person, including persons with mental illness or any other psychosocial disability, as a person fundamentally,
Okay.
and not a patient or a mentally ill person. That's important. And not to get into the legal jargon, but the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability, UNCRPD, that's driven both these new legislations in this country, actually emphasizes at its core that.
But can I just interrupt?
Personhood.
Can I just interrupt you here
Please,
for a moment?
please.
Easier said than done. How many people would be really willing to walk into the campus of IBAS and say that, look, this is the problem I'm having?
You know what? It's getting better. Not only we are the largest psychiatry OPD in the world. We see about 1,200 people, 150 new people every day.
Okay.
So it's getting better. Unfortunately for this country, our numbers are so huge that whatever efforts are made will remain, limited and minimal. But the other example is, and to give you a small example, at this hospital for last 10 or 15 years, we refer to each client or patient not only while talking to him or her, but while talking about him or her in the corridor, in professional conversations, by name.
Okay.
And not that bed number 20, not that person with paranoid
Okay.
schizophrenia, not that OCD patient. So the personhood concept, I do believe, can be implemented, and it will require a very huge social change that all of us will have to work for.
Okay. I would like to talk about another myth which I was reading, that the women who are associated with some kind of a mental illness, they're not supposed to babysit, they cannot take care of the children. Now how do you change that? Because if a woman is having a particular illness, can you really leave the baby, maybe an infant, with her? How do you really convince? Because that is also some kind of a barrier which the families face normally.
I've also met families where the divorce rate, I mean, in women, they've been deserted, they've been abandoned. If the woman has a mental illness, then they've been abandoned, not the other way around. If it's a man who has a mental illness, they remain married. Yes, but from the point of view of safety, from what you're saying is that depends on the level of the mental illness of the mother or the person.
Okay.
Yes, if the person is very severely mentally ill and is not on medication, can get violent, then I think we need to take some safe measures. But by and large, I think the family can ensure, because these people, a very part of their psychosocial education and daily routine is tasks. So when they go back home, to give them a sense of responsibility. It could be true, there are smaller kids at home, they are working, they're working in the evening, so just supervise their tuition, which means, that gives them a sense of purpose, that we are also doing something. And maybe, women can also be...
Can I also quickly say that what's important is what we have tried putting out in the hospital practice at this place. What the person with mental illness deserves and requires is a protective watch,
Yes.
Okay.
not restriction or control.
Okay.
So, be it in the family, be it in the hospital, be it on the street or at the workplace, certainly the person, at least for some periods of time, might require a protective watch. That is supportive.
Supervision.
I would like somebody by my side and help me if I need help. But unfortunately, most systems, including hospitals, end up confusing this issue of protective watch with control or restrictions. And it's a thin line that's difficult to recognize and implement, but that's crucial
Okay.
for families too.
Yeah.
I mean, in my view, frankly, I don't see any illness that should restrict a mother from looking after the child. If I might quickly mention, the new mental health care actually lays down explicitly. No mother will be separated from her child during treatment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's significant.
And you have a ward which has kids.
We do.
That's amazing at
We
IBHAS.
do.
So the mentally ill mother have the kids with
But
them.
the biggest myth, if I might get a chance, is mental illnesses are not treatable or they remain lifetime. They don't.
Okay.
Like many other health problems, many mental health problems are transient and temporary or episodic or cyclical. And most importantly, almost all mental health problems, mental illnesses are easily treatable.
Okay.
If that's the message, if we can get across to people, the treatable nature of mental illnesses.
Okay. So the world doesn't come to an end if you're having a
Of
mental
course
illness.
not. Absolutely.
Okay.
Well said.
Okay.
Prevention.
Prevention. Of course.
I think the biggest onus, I think a lot of mental issues and mental health issues, apart from certain of course chemical and certain genetic reasons, they're entirely man-made. I mean, which are external to your situation. Let us say.
With you on that, and
Yeah.
especially about what Nina and you are both saying about prevention. A number of things that Nina said. Can I also mention, in view of what Radhalakshmi is saying, that the whole issue of prevention and differences in data from different cultures, as you are saying, is important to recognize. Between the West and the East, there is a huge difference in the occurrence of depression, anxiety, phobia.
Right.
Right? So the Western countries have much higher rate. The global figures are 1 in 4. The American figures are 1 in 2. Indian figures are only 1 in 10. So we still have a huge protective here. The other data set that's very important is the urban-rural difference. Urban Indian populations have about 1.5 times, if not twice, the rate of psychiatric disorders as compared to rural populations. That's mainly again because, as Nina and Radhalakshmi are saying, it's because of the socio-cultural factors. And as you were saying earlier, it's alcoholism and drug abuse in men. It's neurotic disorders, depression, anxiety in women that contributes to that difference. Now, the point is that how do we, at the same time, let's also face this. if you talk about preventive mental health and promoting mental health beyond a certain limit, that gets into the socio-political economic reality.
Right.
True, absolutely, and that has to
You
be
see,
considered.
well-being, I hope Nina will agree, wellness and well-being, while it's all in the mind, it does matter what kind of a housing do I get, how much comfort do I have, how safe do I feel.
Absolutely.
You know, we work a lot with the homeless populations, and there's a number of things to learn from there. But one thing that I've learned from homeless populations is that if we can all downscale our expectations, which are difficult, of course, but the other harsh reality, unfortunately, is also that the homeless mentally ill populations are growing in huge numbers. The city of Delhi, our estimate is there are at least 10,000, possibly 20,000 homeless mentally ill men and women. Now, to take this discussion to the other level, what Gaurav has been actively involved in and what he was talking about, those people lodged in mental health institutions and mental hospitals. See, the trouble that occurred was, like in many other things, we follow the Western example somewhat blindly. And so we started doing the closure or at least the reform of mental hospitals like the one here, the Shadra Mental Hospital becoming IBAS. In last 20 years, we have got in from the street and destitution about 3,000 persons who, when they came in, most of them did not even know their name.
Okay.
They got treated, they recovered and got back to their families. Nearly 100%, all of them.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this is unfortunately not the story.
But this was example of IBHAS, right? But
IBHAS.
how many mental...
Many other
Okay,
hospitals
Okay,
like Gaurav
I'll
is
come to
saying.
you after this. Let him just complete.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
There are about 12,000 or 15,000 people, I agree with him, I have been on those committees, who are still languishing. But the thing that I wanted to flag is, if you start deinstitutionalizing, not keep people in mental hospitals and mental health institutions, which is a great goal, unless you build alternatives in terms of aftercare homes and social care facilities, they are going to end up on the street.
Absolutely.
In every major Indian city, homeless mentally ill are growing. Fortunately, there again, some states that I mentioned are beginning to do the aftercare homes thanks to activists like Gaurav Bansal and the Apex Court. Aftercare homes are happening.
Okay.
Halfway homes are happening. I will still go back to what I think Radhakshmi said earlier. We also seem to have this one problem, a few problems in this country related to this. Every law enforcement task is given to that beat constable. Every health task is given to that medical officer in PHC. Every social evil is to be corrected by the family. I think it's time in the 21st century that we recognize the responsibility of the state.
Right.
And the responsibility of the state is to provide all those facilities.
Right. But state, when you talk about the responsibility of the state, it's the state's job to give you mental health hospitals and all the institutions, aftercare homes. I was in fact coming to you, Gaurav, on this. That what has been your experience with the halfway homes and the aftercare homes? Why do you think that people land up there and there are not many aftercare homes, and why can't the government beyond a point stretch itself to build more and more homes like that?
See, first of all, we are sitting in IBHAS. I hope that many of us have visited the mental hospitals in UP, Uttar Pradesh, like the Bareilly and Varanasi and Agra. They are just a jail, and the moment you enter in those hospitals, you yourself get negative kind of vibrations there. This is the whole difference when you come to IBHAS, and then in case you go to Bareilly Mental Hospital, you will feel that even the doctors are not so sensitized. They are just saying, okay, bhai, ye pagal hai, ise bharti kar do. The word they are using is the pagal.
Pagal, exactly.
And even our law says lunatic. In IPC, we are talking about the lunatic, the British era laws. They are till date they have not updated. And it is the duty of the government, because on the international platform, it is only our government which claims that this we have made a law with as far as the right of persons with disability is concerned, mental health sector is concerned.
Absolutely.
But the British era laws are continuing. Even in the one of my case where I have challenged the Hajj policy, they are saying that a Muslim can't perform a Hajj because he is a mentally. What kind of law is this? So people are going courts. People are going court. They are just saying कि भाई okay, this is ये नहीं चलेगा.
Right.
ये नहीं चलेगा
But
attitude.
when it comes to sensitization, Dr. Desai, I would like to come to you that law is being made by the lawmakers, and the first step is to sensitize the lawmakers. Like for example, he said that the word lunacy is still being mentioned in the law. Now, how do you really?
That's the kind of set of anomalies that I think reluctantly one will have to learn to live with till the time that they get corrected. I'm entirely with Gaurav that the two major streams, IPC and CRPC, still use the word at least unsound mind, if not lunacy. And there are about 145 laws which still talk about unsound mind. They shouldn't. But I think I would like to see the positive. I do believe that the changes are happening, and if we can all work together, the changes will happen more assertively. I want to go back to what Radhakshmi was saying. The media and the society in general, I must painfully reluctantly agree with her, does seem to be, as a sweeping generalization, at least lacking in sensitivity, if not actively insensitive. Inclusiveness doesn't come easy to any set of human beings. We must face that again psychologically. People who seem different from us, people who behave differently, people who have different color of eyes and skin and are excessively short or tall or obese or much worse psychosocial disability, do tend to get excluded. That's a human social reality that some countries and societies have overcome. We have a long way to go there. And as I think Nina said, unfortunately, the inner suffering of a person with mental illness externally doesn't get seen. If I may come back to that and bring all of us back to that, the helplessness and the lack of control over one's behavior or emotions that a person with mental illness goes through, sometimes for only a few months, sometimes for a longer period, is something that we need to recognize. Persons with mental illness are people who deserve our help and empathy, not pity, not charity, but they deserve our empathy, compassion. More importantly, it's their right to get the treatment that they should get. And I think again, much as I'm uncomfortable about the fact that Mental Health Care 2017 is very aspirational. There's a whole lot of positives about the new act, but one problem is that it's very aspirational. It promises things that is going to be difficult to deliver.
Okay.
Now that's always a huge debate, and our people from the other sectors might want to comment on that. How desirable is it for a law to be aspirational? For example, mental health care has been now assured as a right.
Right.
And I keep saying this ad nauseum in last few weeks and months. Healthcare is not a right in this country yet. Healthcare is a desirable goal, but mental health care is a right. Now, in the reality of the society and the government policies and the non-implementation that we have all discussed in last 20 or 30 minutes, how are we as a nation, as a society, on behalf of state, whoever else, how are we going to ensure mental health care as a right?
But when you talk about Gaurav, when you talk about this new mental health law, it says that it's pro-poor, it's pro-rights, but as Dr. Desai was saying, that it's too aspirational. What are the ground realities when it comes to the implementation of the law?
See, we are sitting in national capital, है ना? Just go 100 kilometer away from the national capital, you will find out the reality of and the homeless, the families, and the implementation is so poor because of the reason, two reasons are there. That first of all, the lack of political will and administrative will, and even the doctors. I'm sorry that I'm saying this, but
Excluding Dr. Desai.
excluding Dr. Desai.
Right.
So even the doctors, they treat the patient, a mentally ill patient, by way of using the word, which I'm saying again, कि भाई उस पागल को यहाँ ले आओ.
Exactly.
So the moment, see, the reason is that the person who is going to treat the person is not sensitized. So this is the plight, and this is happening as far as the UP is concerned, in most of the rural area of UP, and in Bihar,
Situation is
situation
really,
is
really bad.
literally, we are in emergency area.
But let's I think you mentioned it clearly, but let's break down the problems one by one. Now, when you talk about the institutional setup, when you talk about doctors, you talk about ASHA workers, the ground reality is that you don't have doctors, you don't have psychiatrists, just about 5,000 psychiatrists in the whole country and about 2,000 clinical psychologists. So how do you deal with the situation?
Whose duty is to appoint the doctor is the duty of the executive only. It's the duty of the elected government, which we call the सरकार को काम करना है इस पे. A common person can't say कि भैया, common person has only one thing. If he is facing some problem, he just go to the doctor and say.
You just spoke about the Sarkar, so let me get in Dr. Desai and ask him that you are coordinating with the central government as well as the state government. And when it comes to coordination between the central and the state authorities, how much of a smooth coordination is really happening? Are the people really aware of what they are doing, how they need to coordinate the systems at various levels to the grassroots?
I will say this, and I don't know if all these colleagues who are actively interested in mental health as observers outside of the mainstream would agree, and I would really solicit comments on that. But to me it seems that the reality about mental health is getting better.
Okay.
What we are facing and feeling so anguished about, Gaurav and I equally do, and all of us do, I'm sure all six of us, is the larger reality of the Indian society and Indian socio-political system. Whatever are the ills of the Indian society and Indian socio-political system, non-implementation to the dishonesty in implementation, is not exclusive to mental health. Should mental health and healthcare deserve a higher attention than even other problems? Yes, it should. But to me it seems, if you will all comment, that whatever is the reality of Indian socio-political system is also affecting mental health.
Right. Let me just get in.
Yeah, I would also like to bring in here the large body of volunteers, because I've been a volunteer for the last 20 years. It's amazing how much the volunteer body is doing. And also, I would also like to bring in another aspect is the mental health of the carer. Earlier the term we used was a caregiver. Now we use the term carer. Somewhere in this whole debate about mentally ill, we seem to forget a very large chunk of caregivers. So I think their mental health is equally important. I also work very closely with families of terminally, with cancer patients. And I think the person who's going through his own journey is there, but the carer, the immediate family, could be a spouse, could be a parent, they go through hell. So somewhere mental health here also covers. So I think to work on a positive note, there are a lot of support groups. So we have support groups in the national capital. We have support groups of families which are working on an all India basis. So there is hope.
Right.
So because these support groups are taking on the lacunae of maybe psychiatrists or therapists or certified counselors.
Right.
So we have a huge body of volunteers in the field. Yeah.
Yes,
there are, why I said that we are in, as far as the mental health is concerned, we are in the emergency situation, because there are families, there are persons in the family that whole of the family members are mentally ill.
Right.
And you must have read in the newspapers that a person is living with a dead person.
Yes.
So this is the situation when whole of the family members are mentally ill. So why we are talking about the implementation of an act, but we have no data. We have no data. One more thing, I filed one RTI because the Right of Person with Disability Act says that there must be a data as far as the person with disabilities is concerned.
Right.
So person with disability also includes mentally ill persons. So I requested the NDMA, because under the RPWD Act, it is the mandate of the NDMA to have a data. Because in the disaster situation, the worst category of the persons who is going to affect is the mentally the right of person, the person with disabilities.
Right.
So just 2 days back, they informed me that they don't have any data. So this is the situation.
Data collection is another huge issue.
Another issue.
Right.
When we don't have any data, so how we are going to implement, how the things will improve, how many hospitals we need, how many doctors we need.
In fact, if
how
I'm
many-
not wrong, Dr. Desai, the first mental health survey was done very recently. That was the first mental health survey?
National Mental Health Survey.
Yes. Okay. Rajlakshmi, what I wanted to come to you was that, Dr. Desai was talking about prioritizing between the general health care and the mental health care. Priority, when we talk about priority, then again everything boils down to budgeting. How much government, wise budgeting is the government doing on mental illness. What has been your experience? You've been writing a lot on mental health issues. What has been your experience so far
See,
when
it
it
has
comes
to be part, of overall healthcare. It can't be again seen as a separate issue. So if you are, and again this whole issue about about giving, a right, it has to be, it has to be matched, with investment in health. You can't just give a right and just expect it to be implemented, in thin air. So it has to be matched with, I think, corresponding, and concrete, investment in health, which sees the creation of more more institutions like IBAS. If you have institutions like IBAS, all over the country,
Absolutely.
the access becomes far more easier. And the other aspect also is the prevention thing, when we were speaking about socio-political as well as economic causes. Now this whole trajectory of economic development, the model of development that our country is pursuing, it does not allow that space for the social sector at all, which includes health, as well as mental health in it. So that trajectory of development and fiscal consolidation, where you are sort of pulling back from the social sector, in a big way. It's not really. So you have rights, you have an advanced, in fact, democracy. In fact, one of the largest democracies. But at the same time, where is the corresponding spending on health as well as the social sector?
Before I
Not
come to
happening.
Nina, I'd like to, Dr. Desai, would like to you to comment on the National Mental Health Program, which was started in 1982 somewhere. It got re-strategized in somewhere in 1992. How far have you really gone with that
Went
plan?
through 4 versions.
Okay.
1982 was the National Mental Health Program of this country, which was globally one of the first few national mental health programs.
Okay.
But with a lot of pain and regret and respect for the previous generations, one must say that, like many other programs and laws and policies, it was so bombastic and so out of touch with reality. Kind of nothing happened for about 15 or 20 years, and so it went through one revision in the 90s, it went through one re-strategization, and it went through one recasting. But yes, the good news, as one must always see, is that by now the Government of India is committed to getting the National Mental Health Program
At the
through
district
district
level.
program at every district.
Okay.
Now, again, how much of that will actually be happening at the ground level or not, we need perhaps watchdogs.
Okay.
We need watchdogs for. But can I also say a couple of things about what Madhu was saying? I think we need to get out of this preoccupation with psychiatrists.
Okay.
I don't think
Okay.
you need qualified psychiatrists or highly qualified clinical psychologists for all the mental health problems. Trained volunteers, lay volunteers, or non-professional volunteers can do wonders.
Like ASHA workers are already into the
ASHA
job.
workers, one is also talking about organizations like Sanjeevani in Delhi since 1976 that has trained lay persons from all strata as volunteers. The range of mental health problems requires differential responses.
Okay.
And so not everybody requires to be seen by a psychiatrist. Of course, not everybody requires to be hospitalized. So that's the deprofessionalization of mental health care, which again, the New Mental Health Care Act does emphasize.
Okay.
Broaden the base of care. The perennial question will be how much of it will be implemented and how well.
Then again, you need a watchdog to
That's-
see an audit. Okay, so your last thoughts to the other panelists one by one. Yes.
I think I'd like to end on a very positive note. I
Okay.
think we've made a beginning, and I think we will go further in this.
Okay. Well said. Gaurav, your thoughts?
I wish to say that there are certain measures which the government has to take, which the society has to take, and we have to develop a kind of a mechanism where the societies, where the grievances of the poor
Okay.
has to be reached to the highest level. because
And
under
that
the
is something which is not happening.
this is not happening.
Okay.
So because persons like doctors like Desai sir and journalists like you, I request all of you to sensitize by way of telecasting the things, because the media has its own kind of a role, and it has a bigger impact.
So at least Rajya Sabha TV has done its bit today.
Absolutely.
Okay, Nina, your last thoughts?
So I was dying to jump in when you were talking about the importance of Sarkar, and I think it's very important for the Sarkar to do whatever they're doing, the lawmakers to do whatever they're doing. But I think as citizens, as people who are influencers out there, I'm talking about them, us, it's all our duty
Absolutely.
to also stand up and do something. And I think there's a huge need for mental health warriors.
Absolutely.
In fact, I was talking to Dr. Anjali Chhabria and her brother, this famous comedian Atul Khatri, and they started something, a property called The Nut and the Shrink, because they had a recent death. A very close friend passed away, committed suicide. So how to create an army of mental health warriors and crusaders? So they're going out there and educating children in colleges and schools. We need more people like that in a lighter fashion. So it's not like, oh, ye pagal ka workshop ho raha hai. No, it's normal. And I think one more thing I think we didn't talk about was the fact that devices
Right.
are killing us. Device disease and disconnection, my favorite topic. We need hygiene there. We need hygiene with devices. I hate them. I use them, but I hate them. I think we really need to be sensitive about picking up our phone in company.
Okay,
I think the
Rajashri?
remedy lies outside, the individual. I think the remedy does not lie inside, but it lies outside. And of course, part of it may be, as we said, psychosomatic reasons or maybe chemical reasons, but then it lies outside. The principal onus again is on the state, I think, to provide the wherewithal, whether it's in terms of access, whether it's in terms of preventing it itself, and prevention lies in I think the overall trajectory which I spoke about, is that also I think that needs to be questioned. There has to be a critique about the trajectory of development, about economic development, which is also causing several distortions in our society today.
Absolutely.
That also needs to be questioned. So I don't think these are sort of disparate and separate entities. It has to be considered as a whole, and mental health is a part of overall health. Yes, it has to be treated separately. It needs a separate treatment and a separate emphasis. Definitely,
In fact,
yes.
Dr. Desai has written a beautiful article today where he says that
Exactly.
mental illness is everybody's business, and
Absolutely,
that's
it
what
should be.
I think is the clincher in your
Right.
article.
Right.
I think so. Can I also say that in a lot of policy dialogues and discourses, we keep talking about Bharat and India.
Right.
Unfortunately, mental health is one of those domains where both Bharat and India are still lagging behind.
Okay.
But the caution is this: Bharat perhaps needs to come up in mental health awareness much more. India, especially the cream de la cream, needs to be aware of another danger. In many ways, we are going the American way or the Western way. And I do believe that the Americans have actually over psychiatricized their society.
Okay.
We don't want to do that.
Okay.
Not every day-to-day experience or abnormality of behavior need not be given a label or medicines.
Absolutely.
So we have this huge problem genuinely. And I'm very troubled about this. On the one hand, we want to increase the mental health awareness. We want people with genuine problems to come forward and take treatment. At the same time, we don't want to make the error of converting every day-to-day experience to a psychiatric label.
True.
So we have a very thin line to walk on.
And
as
I
a
think
nation.
that's where people would want to judge whether, like you said, that you need to deprofessionalize,
I
this
think
entire
so.
approach.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I must say quickly, the users and carers, those who have been through psychiatrics, much as I mean, I'm in a traditional sense, I am everything evil personified, right? I'm a medical doctor, qualified psychiatrist, in a government job, in an administrative position, manager of systems, and yet I heartily welcome, and we keep working with users and carer groups, because it is those persons, users and carers and volunteers, who will bring the empathy of a common man
Absolutely.
to the profession.
Right. And apart from what all the panelists have said, what we can say towards the end is that, as Nina said, that you need to talk about your mental illness. That's where the barriers will be broken. And as Madhu said, that the beginning has been made, the momentum has started, and you need to propel it further with the help of veterans like these who have been here shedding light for the past 1 hour. Thank you, Dr. Desai, Madhu, Gaurav Bansal, Nina Claire and Raj Lakshmi. It was a pleasure having you on Rajya Sabha Television. So that's it on this special episode of our program on the World Mental Health Day. Stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television. Thanks and goodbye.